Okay, party animals, welcome back to episode 3 of our 1964 Chevy Corvette build. I've got Sam the Buffer here. You may have seen him on some of my other videos. He is quickly developing a very good reputation for the master of cut and rub. That's kind of a terminology that in the auto body world. Well, my world, we don't really call it cut and rubbing. I would just call it wet sanding and polishing. Yes. So before you get started, because they're still doing a few tweaks before you can get started, I'd like to illustrate to the guys what's involved, like layout, the products that you choose, that you've chosen, the tools to cut and rub this particular car.
Yes.
Now, what is the goal? Like, why, for example, do you have to, got the phone going on, so first things first, why wet sand it first versus just polishing it?
Wet sanding first is to remove the texture, the orange peel that the vehicle has.
Okay.
Straight out of the gun.
Okay.
As we all know that orange peel, you get it from the shooting the gun.
Okay.
You know.
So just to clarify for people out there, literally orange peel is a metaphor to describe the texture. Now, what gets confusing is people will talk about like, oh, we got to flatten out the paint. But flat in the form of texture is not talking about the gloss level. Flat is literally talking about the texture of the paint. So ideally, if you were going for absolute flawless perfection, you would sand that surface flat, and then you would polish out the sanding marks, and so that you would have the flattest, perfect, most reflective surface you can. But there's a little sidebar to that, because when it comes to the restoration world, what you're often trying to do is not achieve a truly perfectly flat surface to create a perfectly flat reflective surface, because you want to retain what's called the original feel, the original look of the car itself.
Correct.
So originally, when the car rolled off of the assembly line, there's going to be some natural orange peel, some texture to that surface. So often in high-level car restoration, the goal is to not create a perfectly flat, perfect, reflective surface.
Correct.
The goal often is to replicate the original texture of the car when it came off the assembly line, which was, whether it's 30 years, 40, whatever car you happen to be working on. So you want to wet sand it to finesse that texture level so that it resembles as closely as possible to the original texture of the paint when it rolled off the assembly line.
Correct.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's
okay.
The very first review.
So you'll be required to do some wet sanding to it. Once you've introduced what I call a uniform scratch pattern, you've replicated the amount of texture that you do and don't want, so you find that winning balance based on the original texture of the car, then you can polish it out and remove your sanding marks.
Yes.
And you can create that depth, that shine, that gloss, that type of stuff through polishing.
Yeah.
So let's kind of dissect your arsenal of equipment, tools, and maybe you can walk us through that process. For example, since that will be the first step is wet sanding, let's talk about that, because there's different ways that you can go about that process of wet sanding.
Correct.
Whether you have running water out of just a hose, you've got a spray bottle. I notice you have a spray bottle here. So, okay, what I want to do with you guys is take you into Sam's world. Now, every polisher, and if you're a detailer, you can relate to this. Everyone's got their own kind of version of how they go through the processes, their own favorite tools, pads, polishes, compounds, sanding papers. Everyone's got their choices.
Correct.
I'd like to know from you what you have chosen for this particular car. So let's start with the wet sanding process, because there's many ways to do it. Which way are you going to attack this car, and why did you choose that way?
Okay, so first off, with wet sanding is I use a bucket,
Okay.
So by using a bucket, I can use it in my own workplace because I don't have amount of water that I could use. You know, the more water you use on wet sanding, it's better. So
now,
here,
just a little sidebar, not to, sorry to interrupt, but I noticed you have a custom painted.
Yeah, this is a custom painted
That's
bucket.
tricked out.
I've had this bucket for this will be a 3rd year now.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, it's a little beat up, but I can tell it's custom painted.
Yeah,
so that's
it's
pretty
got,
cool.
You know, it's still got love in there. It's got shine.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so you got your bucket. I noticed you have some sandpaper. You've got a grit guard in the bottom.
Yes, grit
Okay.
guard in the bottom always is the best idea for a bucket, especially if you're gonna do any washing, any type of has to do with cars.
Yeah.
I would recommend to have a guard on the bottom.
And that's simply to keep the
the
heavy
dust
particles
away.
down below, where it's separate from the water that you're dipping your, in this case, sandpaper in and out of type
Yeah.
of thing. Okay. So do you have to pre-soften the?
I use DI water.
Okay.
Okay, so if I can't use it or if I'm at another location, regular faucet water is fine.
Yeah.
You know.
But given a choice, you're going to default to deionized water. For me, I just usually use distilled water, which I just buy at the market. So once again, everyone's got their own little tweaks that they do.
Yeah.
So you got your sandpaper soaking in there, and what are you going to start off with on this car?
We are going to start with a 1500 grit paper.
Okay.
Okay. So I soften it out a little bit. You know,
Okay.
just let it soak in for a few minutes.
Uh-huh.
So once it's ready, we're going to use a hard block.
Okay.
Okay, hard block, using it on custom paint. Basically what you're doing is you're blocking the clear coat off the car. So a lot of people,
you're literally sanding away material, and in this case, material means clear coat.
Clear coat.
You're literally sanding away. And what I like to use, because a lot of guys watching this video, they're not necessarily familiar with this. Because my audience is so diverse. I've got people that come in with all different levels of experience, lack of experience, no experience. So I like to use examples from the world that people can maybe relate to more. So let's say you're sanding wood. You know, you want to prep some wood to either restain it, varnish it, put a lacquer over it, whatever. So you start out with a more aggressive sandpaper, and then you work your way down
to the
finer and
softer,
finer grade, correct?
Yes, and then there's 2 types of blocks here that we're using. We are using a hard block, and then we're
Okay.
using a flexible, ordinary, you know, sanding block.
Now, when you say hard, like what do you know what the materials, like, is there any flex to that hard block at all?
No, because this has plexiglass in between,
Okay,
so it's really hard. You won't be able to bend it or break it.
yeah.
Okay, and then you have your ordinary sanding block from your paint
Okay.
store.
Now, I'm just going to kind of play devil's advocate here, for lack of a better description, meaning soft block is going to be for more of the contoured panels, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
And then you've got a hard block because you want a more flatter, because if you have a soft block, it can actually flex while you're sanding, versus a hard block that's going to remain very rigid.
Rigid,
And it's going
yes.
to create a more, and we're talking about the real subtle nuances here.
Correct. And not only that, but there's also people that choose their bare hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know there's a whole debate on that, because I've
Oh,
had
yeah.
people talk about that, where it's like, oh, if you use your bare hands, you're going to get your finger imprints. You know, you're going to wear some grooves into the finish because your hand is too flexible in your fingers and that kind of stuff.
And yes, that is correct, because as we know that, you know, hand printing on a car paint or custom paint,
Yeah.
you will be able to see it.
Yeah.
You know,
if you have a trained eye, you will be able, you can
will be
pick
able
it
to
out.
see it, yes.
And in this case, and there's Tom is over there. If you saw episode 1 or 2, Tom is adjusting the doors. He's performing his magic on that before Sam gets to perform his magic. So when you're talking about a restoration job that's, you know, $300,000 and up,
Requires skills.
Details, yes, it does require skills, but details do matter. So
Yes.
hence the blocks. So
Yes.
blocks do matter. Okay, so wet sanding first, and then,
And I also use a water
okay.
bottle, because here we have very limited water to obviously throw on the floor because we're
Right.
at someone else's shop.
Right.
And we're in Coast Corvette in Anaheim. So we're using very little water. And I'm going to use the spray bottle
Yeah.
to get this done.
Okay.
Again, it's something that, just to eliminate as much water as possible.
Well, really, what I would call that, to interject in the moment, is managing. Meaning, if you have it in a spray bottle, it's contained in the container. Water's only going to come out when you squeeze that trigger. So if you have a hose, of course you could put a nozzle on the hose and you can manage it that way. But out of a hose, typically you're going to get a lot more water than out of a spray bottle.
Correct.
So this is just kind of a way for you to manage the moment.
Just to manage the water that you're using.
And once again, in the event that you did not see episode 1 or 2 of this build out, is that this is a frame off restoration. There is a lot of time and effort to disassemble this car, powder coat that frame, and that engine and frame are pristine right now. So we don't want to make a mess, or you specifically, Sam, do not want to make a mess that A, you're going to have to spend more time cleaning up, and B, you could possibly make a mess in ways that are virtually impossible to clean up on a perfectly frame off restoration. So,
and that's when my buddy comes in.
Your buddy, the clear vinyl wrap.
Yes. So this plastic, what I was going to be used for is basically to cover the engine bay.
Okay.
I use this on all my cars when I do convertible cars, because a convertible rack cannot be wetted, because it has, the material, or get the water sanding marks,
Yes.
like the water. So I use.
It sounds
paper.
like what you're doing is you're describing how you practice safe polishing.
Yes,
So you've got your different prophylactics.
Yeah, I mean, usually, at a shop, the reason why some people take their vehicles to a shop is because they have proper training, proper tools and everything. And that's exactly what I do. I have my own workshop that I work out of in Orange, California. So it's the same thing. I treat every car the same. The reason why, and it all depends on pricing and everything, but it's not about the price. It's about the quality of work that you're getting, and that I'm using the proper tools to get your job done right.
Right, yeah.
So,
and then I often use the analogy of mechanics. So if you go into a service shop, you'll see mechanics, and I'm just gonna span around here. So we've got different toolboxes, and it's kind of bragging rights, where a mechanic will have
Snap-on.
$150,000 worth of tools,
Right.
Snap-on, Matco, whatever. And you think like, okay, dude, do you really need that many tools? That just seems absurd. But the reality is if you're a mechanic and you're making a living off this, first off, time is money. So if you have a tool that fails on you, okay, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Secondly, the right tool literally can make or break your world. Now, even if you only use that tool once every 3 years, it doesn't matter, because there's some jobs that require such precision or that are so difficult to use that you don't care if you're only using that tool once every 3 years. Because that tool in that moment
just saved you a lot of time.
saved you a lot of time and a lot of aggravation. So
That
here
is correct.
you are talking about your tools that really are a critical part of the equation.
Yes.
So you've dissected your different tools so far, how you're going to practice safe polishing and wet sanding.
So this is the new Flex. This is a Rotary.
German made, baby. So
German
Flex,
made.
cordless.
Cordless, brushless, and also up to a 6-speed rotary buffer.
Okay, so that one there is a rotary, not a dual action.
No, this is actually a full rotary.
Okay.
Okay, and we are using the Buff Bright light
Oh yes.
to help me.
We had that at the SEMA show.
Yes, we had that at SEMA show.
Very, very handy.
Yeah, it is. It is handy. So I like it. It's a great machine. The new machines are from Flex are really good. And then also we have the Orbital machine. So this we use for the final.
Okay.
Normally.
Now let me just clarify. Orbital. I'm going to call that a dual action. Now, is that a random orbital or is that a forced rotation?
This is a forced rotation.
Oh, it is. Okay. Which, just to clarify for people, there's two movements. That's why they call it a dual action polisher. There's two movements. It spins and it oscillates simultaneously. On a random orbital, if you apply enough pressure on it, you can get one of those movements to cease. It'll stop. But on a forced rotation, you apply enough pressure and both movements will continue to move.
Correct.
So that actually gives you more control versus less control. So I would call, or I would classify a random as having less control versus a forced rotation. Would that be a fair statement to you in your world?
That's a very good statement.
Okay, so we've got a forced rotation. You're going to start, I'm going to guess you're going to start with the rotary to do the heavy lifting of
the cutting.
The cutting.
The cutting.
Yes.
So so I'm going to use this one when we first start, I'm sorry. And then we're going to use the CSI wool pad.
I recognize that pad.
Yes.
That is my favorite wool pad because I'm part of CSI now. That is what's called a low linting wool cutting pad.
Yes.
And really the only difference with that versus a traditional wool pad, it's still 100% wool. It's still a 4-ply wool, but it's been pre-washed. The fibers have been pre-washed because, as you know, Sam, you get a traditional wool pad, and especially at the very beginning, I mean, it's gonna just throw like fur everywhere.
Yeah, it does. And so we have that, and then also we have our charging station.
Yep.
So these are lithium batteries. It gives you the amount of charge that it's gonna use, and then also it tells you how long it's gonna take to finish charging, which is a really cool object.
Oh, that is cool.
So it tells you right here that 10 minutes, this battery will be fully charged.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, one of the things I talk about when it comes to the cordless tools is I call it being unleashed. You don't realize when you have a power cord attached to whatever tool you're using, how much time and effort that you're not even aware of that you go into managing that cord. So you're not dragging it across the paint, you're not tripping over it, it's not getting hung up on the tires as you're
around
working
the bumpers.
Exactly.
Or anything. Yeah. You throw it over your shoulder.
Yeah, there's ways to manage it, but that's the point, is that it's still time, it's still effort. And once you unleash yourself and you go cordless, you're like, okay, hell yeah, sign me up.
Oh, sign me up.
Yeah. So there's your cordless tools.
All the cordless tools, and then I also
now what's
use
that cool little LED light you got going on there?
This is a
almost
new
looks like a what's from Star Wars.
Yeah,
the lightsaber. Is that what they call those?
Yeah, it's a little one. No, but this is it's a snap-on it's a light by snap-on.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a light by snap-on. It's a new light that just came out.
Oh wow, it's got like a very directed light at the tip, but it's also got this length. So that I have actually not seen that tool before.
Yes, this was just released not too long ago.
That's cool.
I choose this light because it has two different lightings here as well. The tip lighting, it throws a purple light or a purple tint. So that
has to do with K. So for example, just to clarify for people out there, those are LEDs.
Yes, they are LED lighting.
And when it comes to LEDs, they will typically rate them in two metrics. One is lumens and one is K. So K stands for Kelvin. So that will distinguish, like for example, let's say you have a 1000 K light, which will produce a more warm, and they'll actually go into a color spectrum, like purples, blues, that type of color spectrum. So the higher the K level, like let's say a 5,000, 6,000, 12,000, that really gets into a different light spectrum, like purples and that type of stuff. But then the lumens have to do with brightness. And I mean, it just kind of gets complex. But the point is lighting really is a critical part of the equation because it's hard to get something perfect if you can't really see what you're working on.
Correct. That is correct. And then we have our product here. We use the ceramics.
Okay.
CSI.
Which once again, obviously I'm very familiar. So why do you like ceramics yourself?
I've used other product in the past. As we
I imagine you have. I know I have.
This right here really cuts everything down to half. So when you cut something, Usually, you know, you're polishing a car, it would take me about like 3-4 hours. You know, the product is so well, and it cuts everything in half as far as timing wise as well.
Yeah.
Not only that, but after the cleanup, it's a lot easier to clean up. It does have a lot of dust, you know, because I get that a lot. You know, where people send me a message or they say, "Hey, I tried your stuff."
Right.
But
So
it has
dusty.
too much dust.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so that comes with when you're gonna rinse off the car, or you're done with it. You could either blow it off or rinse it off. And then by rinsing it off, this doesn't get hardened like on, you know, crevices.
Yeah.
You know, like your door jambs, your typical molding and stuff like that. So as soon as it hits water, it'll dissolve. So the cleanup after the car has been polished, it will cut your time in half, because as soon as the water hits the product, it will dissolve, you know.
And this is probably where I need to interject, because a big part of my audience is auto detailers or guys that want to get into the auto detailing business. So to them, especially as beginners, they want a product that what they're focused on, because of lack of experience and a high level of fear factor and anxiety level when they're first starting out, is they're looking more towards the user experience.
Right.
And for them, the user experience is going to be based largely on inexperienced, because they don't have enough experience underneath their belt.
Correct.
So they're looking for things like products that are low dusting,
And easier
as
to clean.
in no dusting. They want products that have a really, really long working time that we might call, I don't know what you call it in your world, but in our world we'll call it, it'll stay wetter or greasier, so it allows for a longer working time, and it just seems easier as a beginner. But the problem with that is that those products are made with what is called traditional heavy solvents that actually can soften the paint while you're polishing it. They will often be formulated with fillers, so that as you're working, you can't really see what you're getting, because they're made with fillers in order to allow for a longer working time.
Correct.
They're made with other additives that will create no dusting. So, because I've heard the same thing, it's like, oh, it dusts too much. It's like, well, okay, show me your current compound that you're using, or your current polish that you're using that's not dusting at all. Because you may have something like that, but I guarantee it's filled with stuff that are unwanted. So your polishing process may look perfect to you, but then after Johnny customer gets it and they take it through the first car wash, or they wash it themselves or whatever, suddenly like, oh wow, look at all these swirl marks that are now showing up.
Yeah, that's the swirl marks or the holograms, or you'll see, you know, fine towel scratches.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Micro marring is kind of
that's
the glorified term they call it in my world. It's like, oh, I'm going to introduce micro marring into the equation. But if you have a product that has those types of fillers, that's the trade-off.
Yes, and then when you're done with a car, you're actually getting a true shine out of it. You know, you're not enhancing it. You don't have any fillers. You don't have anything other than or any oil residue.
Yeah.
You know, so this product has been really, really good with me, and also
and it's body shop safe too.
Yeah, it's body shop safety as well. It doesn't have a smell, you know. So as you know, some products they do carry a smell or whatever.
Oh, big time solvent smell.
Yeah,
it's really
solvent
nasty.
smell. You're like, oh wow, that they're using, you know, whatever other product. You can smell.
Yeah,
it,
you can smell in the
you
air.
know, and this stuff you don't. You
Yeah.
know, so and then
Okay.
we also have the D1. This is the enhancer polisher. So on a custom paint, I use this as well because it helps the enhancement. Okay, and that's why it's an enhancer.
Yeah.
You know, so what it does is that it gives a little bit brighter of a shine, or it gives it a better shine on a custom paint.
Yeah.
So candies, you know, pearls, and metallic paint jobs, you will notice the difference when you're using the D1.
Okay.
And then we have our quick detailer, which is the Q7. Obviously, we all know that, you know, quick detailer, it's something that, you know, you can take it anywhere, you know. The quick detailer, when I use it when I'm cutting and rubbing a car, I use it to let me see what I'm working with. Did I remove the scratches properly? Did I remove the sandpaper marks?
Yeah.
You know, so what I do is I use this as I'm polishing the car to make it easier for me.
Okay.
Okay, and I also use my buddy right here,
Light.
the light, just so I can
Scrutinize your work.
to see what I'm doing and where it needs to be sanded more. Now we're gonna move on to the foam pad. The foam pad, this is used obviously with the ceramics and the D1.
Okay, so just to clarify, your steps will be first to wet sand with, what'd you say, 1500 grit.
1500 grit.
Are you going to stop there or transition into
We're going to transition into a 2000 grit.
Okay.
That way it gives you finer scratch marks. You know,
Sure.
it helps you take the scratch marks off the heavier grid. So in the color sanding world would be starting from a high number and ending in starting from a low number, taking it to a high number.
Yes.
So the higher you take it to, that's where you removing finer scratches. So you'll hear the terminology as, oh, I use a 5,000 grit, or I use a 6,000,
Yeah.
or 8,000. Yes,
Right.
there is a 8,000 level. There is a
Shoot, now they have
6,000 level.
10,000.
10,000 hasn't been released yet completely.
Yeah.
But 8,000, it is for sure out there in the market now.
Yeah.
And I've been using 8,000 for a year now.
Okay.
Which was brought to me by, you know, a company that wants me to try it out. So yeah, 8,000 is available. But here we're using 1,500 and 2,000.
Okay.
Okay, on this Corvette.
So you're going to wet sand. Let's say we're just going to talk about a single panel. You're going to do the whole car, but let's say on a single panel, you're going to start out with 1,500. Make sure you have created a uniform scratch pattern with the 1,500. Then you're going to come back in with the 2,000, knock those deeper scratches down to finer scratches in the form of 2,000 grit. Then at that point, what are you going to transition into?
We're going to use the high speed.
Okay, so the
Rotary?
Rotary high-speed polisher with the blue wool cutting pad.
Yes.
Okay, and that will allow you to remove those 2,000 grit sanding marks.
Yes.
Once you've done that, then what are you going to transition into?
We're going to transition into the Orbital.
Okay, so you're going to switch machines and you're going to switch pads at that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to switch into the red foam finishing pad, but you're going to stick with the same polish, correct? The ceramics?
Yes, the ceramics.
Okay, yeah. And really, would it be a fair statement to say that once you go through those stages and you now have switched to the red finishing pad, but all you've done is use the ceramics, would you not say that probably 99% of the world would call that perfection at that point?
Yeah, it will, because
what I'm trying to get at is that you're actually going to use the D1 enhancer, but unless you have a trained eye, which I know you do, I know I do, I know Tom, the formulator of those products, does, but how much of the world really knows that? The point I'm trying to illustrate is that really the ceramics was intended as a single product polish.
Yeah, it's a single product, and also a one product, two pads.
Yes.
Yes. So
based on
keep
that,
it simple.
Yeah.
One product, two pads. Let's go.
But you're shooting for a higher level of perfection in this one, which is why Tom developed the D1.
Yeah.
So you're actually going to take it to that next level of perfection by using the D1 after you've finished all your work with the ceramics.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
We have our microfiber towels.
Now there's a lot of people.
This is a topic that you always like to talk about.
Yeah. So here, let's segue. We'll finish here with the microfibers, because this is where I personally get a lot of flack. I don't know about you, but because of my audience, you got endless people with endless opinions. You've got all these keyboard jockeys. You've got all these what I call YouTube detailers. Now there's some point of spending money on high quality microfibers, and I'm a big fan of that. Probably like really my go-to brand right now is Autofiber. They make quality microfibers, but I still use a lot of Kirkland brand, which you get them at Costco. Those microfibers you told me come from Sam's Club, correct?
Sam's Club, yes.
Now there's going to be a lot of inexperienced keyboard jockeys out there. They're going to be like, oh dude, that guy's got to be a hack. Who would ever use and it's one of the benefits of this is it's truly a disposable microfiber cloth. So it's a quality microfiber cloth that's also disposable. So every time you reach into that bag, you're starting out with a virgin, brand new, never been touched microfiber cloth that you do not have to worry about going through the wash machine and the dryer and picking up unwanted debris along the way.
Correct.
So you yourself use those.
I use these a lot, and I'm not one of those that would take this and put it on a bucket on the side, because I'm gonna go home after I'm done with a car and wash them.
Yeah.
Okay, so to me, I've pretty much done the math to where, like, I buy a bag of 36 and I use 10 towels in one car.
Yeah.
So 10 towels at 10 cents. I mean, it's a dollar. It's $1.
Yeah.
So it cost me $1 pretty much
To be very safe.
to be very safe.
Yeah. And two, what I tell guys is like, you can put the most expensive, highest quality cloth in my hand, whatever they have decided that is, and I know that I could damage the car with it if I wanted to. So the point I'm saying is that I can also take a cloth like that, and if I use it appropriately, knowing its limitations and its abilities, I can also use it appropriately and not introduce unwanted damage to it.
Correct.
So like whether you're talking about a tool, a pad, a polish, a microfiber cloth in this case, is once it's in your hands, you have a lot of control over it. So you don't have to be an idiot about it. And that's is where I get into this debate with guys like, oh, I would never use a Kirkland microfiber cloth. That's for hacks. It's like, well, fine, then don't do it. How about that? There's your answer for you. Don't do it. But if you know what you're doing, then guess what? It actually can be a very useful, economical, and safe tool in your hands because you have experience.
Correct.
Would that be a fair statement?
That'd be a fair statement. So the cost of a towel,
Yep.
10 cents.
Very cheap.
When you buy it by a high quantity.
So it's cheap. So you're
Brand
being
new.
a smart business owner. What's that?
And then it's brand new.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm getting to. So not only is it cheap, you're being smart, you're being economical, but you're being very safe because each time you pull, like I said, each one of those is a virgin cloth, never been touched.
Never been touched.
So now you don't have to worry about it picking up debris as you wash it, because what I do is when I'm working on a car of this level, that I am going to use a virgin cloth each time. And then when it touches the wash machine, those cloths are now downgraded to lesser jobs. And that's where I manage my world, and I manage the risk, or as much of the risk out of the equation as I can. So clearly you're doing the same thing.
Yes.
So we'll cut it there. We've spent quite a bit of time discussing your products and your tools of choice for this particular car. You guys tune in for because this will be episode number 3.
So
and we're gonna, episode number 4, we're gonna actually show you in action of you literally cutting and rubbing. What do you guys, so that's a new terminology. Wet
Wet
yeah, in my
sanding,
world it's just wet
color
sanding and
sand.
polishing.
Yes.
But you guys call it cut and rub, right?
Cut and rub.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Sam. Appreciate it. So you guys tune in
Stay
to
tuned.
episode number 4.